Welcome to Gamechangers, a series where we sit down with innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders who are redefining what's possible in surgery. These conversations are more than technique or technology. They're about the courage to think differently, the creativity to push boundaries, and the vision to transform care for patients worldwide. Our game-changing conversation today begins with Professor James Rutka. Dr. James Rutka is one of Canada's most accomplished neurosurgeons. A pediatric neurosurgeon and senior scientist at Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children, Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, and a member of both the Orders of Ontario and the Order of Canada. The first Canadian neurosurgeon to serve as editor-in-chief of the Journal of Neurosurgery, he has led numerous international neurosurgical organizations and has served as the R.S. McLaughlin Professor and Chair of the University of Toronto's Department of Surgery for over a decade. From 2011 to 2022. He's clearly a global authority on the molecular genetics of brain tumors. He has lectured around the world and co-authored more than 650 peer-reviewed publications. This game changer has shaped both the scientific inquiry and clinical practice.
Well, first of all, thank you for everything. This is an interesting structure. There are so many things that you said that I have some stuff here, and I just want to forget this and just talk about where we're going to go. And I probably will riff a little bit off that. But why don't we let Goran get started, Dr. Rutka, and then we'll go from there.
So Mo has asked me here again to come and help him co-host this event. And when I saw Dr. Rutka's biography, when I read it, I couldn't say no. I have to admit, I am on parental leave. I have a 2-month-old son at home. He's very well taken care of. I have in-laws at home. I read to him last night. I'm not ignoring my son. Nevertheless, I think something like this is a good opportunity, and coming here, having him talk about his family, and I think I was a little bit surprised. I thought I'd come into this presentation and talk and hear about his accolades and the stories of his accomplishments, which are many, and then he spoke about family. And I thought that was really inspirational. I think when we think about people like Dr. Rutka, we think about this implicit paradox, this trade-off between family, between friends, between the personal, the lake, and then the professional. And I guess we have a lot of residents here in the room, and a lot of people sacrificing time, potentially facing burnout, thinking about what they should do next. And it strikes me like you and your father, and when I think about game changers, what really kind of came to the surface for me is the game changers here are not just Dr. Rutka. It's his dad, it's his mom, it's his wife. These are all the people that changed his life, that were game changers for him, so he can do it, kind of pass that on. So I think there's this responsibility to be able to do that to the extent that we can. Can you speak more about this? I don't want to call it work-life balance. It seems it's such a cliche question. But how do you manage to be a good father? Be there for your son and your daughters, and at the same time be successful, be there for your patients, be there for Lucas. How does one balance that? What advice would you give to young people who maybe are not thinking about that right now, but I imagine there are consequences you make now further on in your life? You, by the way, you seem to have been a great father during your PhD, a very busy time. So why don't you tell us maybe more about that, or maybe more about how you kind of treat this contradiction, if it is one?
Yeah, thanks very much, Goran. Great question, and I think there's been some generational changes as I've seen through my lifetime and my career. I think, for example, the neurosurgeons who practiced before my times, the generation before me, they had it way worse than I did in my training. They were definitely time on task all the time, limited time at home with their families, didn't get a chance to know their children as well as let's say I did in the next generation. And when they were either with their families or when we saw them socially, there was not much information coming to us about their kids, what their families were doing and so on, because they just didn't know, unfortunately. And maybe back then that's what it took to be a really good neurosurgeon. Maybe the technology wasn't there well enough to prepare the neurosurgeons for what they needed to do day in, day out. But as I started, it was a little bit better, but it was still busy. And I can definitely recall times when I was in the hospital every other night for 6 months straight. So spending this is before our kids came along, so when I was fairly newly married, but still, like the impact, reverberations to your spouse. I mean, these things are, you have to really work hard to keep those relationships going at times like that. So, things have improved. For example, the call schedule is no longer 1 and 2. It's more on the line of, as those who are clinicians here, 1 and 4 or less, meaning potentially one night away every 4 nights. You would never do, as I did, a whole week in the hospital over the holidays at Christmas time, because 7 days straight without leaving the confines of the hospital. And that's ridiculous. In fact, that's unhealthy. And in fact, that was wrong, right? Doing it that way back then. But it's not like that now. And those of you who are clinicians know that it's changed. But still, demands are serious for clinical medicine, for surgery, and you really need to have good time management skills in order to avoid the traps that some families, partners fall into, where they're just not present for each other at times that they do have available for one another. So I think there's been probably 2 generations since I graduated from medical school, and so I think thanks to groups like PARO, the Professional Association Interns and Residents of Ontario, and other bodies that are overseeing work and life issues, it's gotten better. Now there's talk about parental leave.
Yeah.
So now there's a neurosurgery resident in our program who's on parental leave, a male. Fantastic. That never existed in my day. You wouldn't even talk about it. If you did that, you probably would be eliminated from the program back then if you took parental leave as a male. But I think things have gradually changed and it's better. But try to answer your question directly now, Gordon, I would say I tried. Whenever I had the time, whenever I was home, and whenever I got home, it wasn't so much about the hours of time, but like what you did with the time that was available. And I think my kids would say the same, that they remember Dad being present, like in the moment when he was there. It was that their whole world kind of revolved around me because I was there for them, and they appreciated that. And I did make conscious efforts, especially when I was a junior faculty, because kids were young at that time, to make it to everything that was important in their lives, their music recitals, their piano lessons, their ballet recitals, teacher-parent interviews, and so on. So and sometimes I would be scrambling out of the hospital to get there, but that was a priority, and making it a priority, I think, helped. But was I home enough? That's a good question, and I would say that I probably missed out on a lot of things because I was busy as a resident training in neurosurgery and then as a faculty. There's no question about that, but I really tried to optimize what time that I had with them when I was there.
Thank you.
Jim, one thing that struck me, and I suspect it struck many of you, just how many in the audience participate in some sort of, or currently or in the past have been involved in sports in some level? Okay, so there's a bunch of folks. So how many of you have played at an elite level? Like, however you define elite, meaning, provincial level or a high level. Okay, so there's a proportion of you. And there's a recent paper that came out, and I'm just gonna, so I don't want to improperly paraphrase it, but a paper came out in Science at the end of the year, December 2025, and the actual title was Recent Discoveries on the Acquisition of the Highest Levels of Human Performance. And what struck me was it was a review of 34,000 individuals in their adulthood, and they make a point of saying basically that early exceptional performance and later exceptional performance are within a particular domain, are actually rarely the same individual. So there's a rare group of individuals who perform very highly in athletics early in their career, who go on to do elite level sports. And I'll give you just some more of this. So 12% of junior elite athletes in their adulthood become world-class senior athletes. Junior top 3 ranked chess, students 12% of those ultimately become senior top 3, and the top 1% of academics actually end up having the top 5% of salary for a host of other reasons. And I'll finish with one final point, which I think is really important, and this gets back to science and Nobel laureates, and then I'll get back to my question to you, which is Nobel laureates in the sciences compared with national level awardees engaged in more multidisciplinary activity in terms of study, practice, and working experiences, both within science, so many different disciplines within science, and outside of science, whether it's professions such as arts and music. You, I think, beautifully, architected the idea of diversity early in your career, whether it's diversity through networks, through activities, that in many ways I think could be arguably have fueled some of your future later life advances and the things that have happened to you. How do you reconcile that, or have you thought of it in that way?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I was unaware of some of the data that you presented, but that is interesting. And, I guess I'm the type of person who, you're driving your car down the road and you see the immediate stoplight in front of you, and you know how to respond to that. But throughout my life, it's just not been that immediate stoplight. I'm looking at the one beyond it and the one beyond on that. So it's like just to see like how my car is going to travel and whether I can make it straight, whether I have to adjust my speed to get where I want to be as quickly as possible. So I've always been looking at the horizon. I guess that's one way to say that I was goal-directed, pretty linear in what I wanted to accomplish. And that held true for the sports that I played. It held true for the music I talked about. Also held towards a lot of the other creative activities I demonstrated this morning in my presentation. Maybe I came by it by virtue of having parents that were somewhat involved in activities. I mentioned my mother's skill at basketball when she was in high school, and my father actually was a long-distance runner. He ran, I don't think he ran a sub-4-minute mile, but he was pretty fast. He was actually pretty good. So maybe there's some genetics there that helped me with acquiring skills, let's say, in performance for athletic activities. But music, I don't know where music came from because my mom and dad are both tone deaf. But I could hear a song from a very early age, like 3 or 4 years old, and I could go down to the piano and I could replicate that melody at that age. And I think that's just something out there. It's like somebody has knowledge or a talent for art, or it could be for physics or other types of instruments. I think it's just innate. I'm a hopeless artist, but I can acquire language because I've learned now five languages or so on. But there's some things I just can't do. Art is one. I just can't do it. But I can do athletics, and whatever gave me that opportunity or talent, I'm not sure. But I played for it, and I also took it and I enjoyed it so much. And lessons learned from activities in sports and with teammates working together have held me in great stead as I move forward in medicine and my career in program buildings.
And I'm going to ask, it's meant a little bit in jest, but it's not. There's a serious question to this, which is, just like you, I look back and I say, I had a pretty canny ability of getting on teams that would go ahead and win championships. Now, I never played. I was the bench warmer. But I could figure out, that team's doing pretty well. I'm going to try out and help the team on the practices. And so my friend, who was everything was, hey, in a clutch, I knew the ball was never coming to me. In the clutch, I knew I was never going to be in the game, but I was there for the team. And I was around volleyball. I was around, classic example, Bandari in grade 8 missed the volleyball championship to go to band practice. Why? He quotedly said, "At least I'll play in the band." Literally, that was out there. So, but I can tell you, I was, in many ways, through friendships, I wouldn't say dragged, but I would go to a lot of these things. And in some weird way, I was fairly average at all of these sports, but I got to experience them. Can you speak a little bit to probably the 95% 5% of individuals who don't get sort of the star lead role, but the value of just activities, whether it's sports, arts, music, and the power of just trying things even if you're average.
No, participation is really fundamentally one of the most important things that we can do in activities outside of our main domain. And our championship Vanier Cup team, for example, it really helps to be on the winning side of a team like that. And you were a part of, it sounds like, a lot of championship teams, right?
Well, I guess.
But we still, so this is now 40, let me see. Yeah, almost 40, it's going to be 50 years in a couple of years of our championship victory. So a long time ago. But we get together still, and everybody shows up. Those that were, on the first string, second string, those that were helping, with other aspects of the football team's success, everybody shows up, everybody's a part of it. And I think, and I've always been highly acknowledging of those that have participated, been involved, and tried to build that sort of team rapport, because everybody has a significant and component part to play in the success of an organization.
So let me follow up on a sport-related question. So I think a lot of hard lessons can be learned from sports. You have two teams, or you have more teams, and you don't always win. You might have won the Vanier Cup, but I do remember you saying that wasn't the best that I've ever played, right? And I'll tell you a very brief story here, and I kind of only do this to warm you up to maybe you can also be embarrassing. I competed at a national level in karate when I was a kid, and we would have these competitions where you would go to like a hotel, like a large venue where you can have like multiple rings set up. And the day would always start off with younger, lighter fighters. So you would have the kids, then you'd have the lighter weight classes. I was like a bigger male, top weight class in my division. I would always go last. You never knew when you would go up. So you'd show up really early in the morning, and you keep warming up. So I was warming up. I showed up to this one event, like not super high stakes, but high level, and just warming up for hours and hours and hours. And for 4 or 5 hours, I said to myself, like, this is a waste of my time. I should be studying, and I left. And I left that event. And I got in trouble from my sensei after that. Now, I say that because I didn't really leave because it was a waste of my time. I left because I felt scared. I felt scared to fight, and I felt scared to go in the ring. And it wasn't so much about the fighting itself. It was the nervousness and the performance anxiety. And now being an academic, being a teacher, one of the lessons that I take from that I never want to do again is give up on something because I didn't have the courage, even though it was worth doing. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I spent years and years practicing, dedicating, and I could not wait those extra 2 hours. That was a bad calculus because I was scared. So I think that was for me like an important life lesson of showing up and doing your best, even when you're scared, saying like, what's the point? Like, there's a reason why you're scared. It's okay to go through with it. So I say this because I think these lessons exist, and they especially exist in sports. And I wonder if you have like a hard lesson from athletics where you'd say like, man, and you did mention throughout my career as a neurosurgeon, like I've taken those lessons. What are those lessons?
Yeah, so we had great victory, as mentioned, for the Vanier Cup. But boy, I've had failures. And, success is not measured by how high you keep rising. It's really, as you know, you have so many failures. It's really the measure of how high you climb after each of your failures, because lessons learned from each failure. We lost the championship game in high school when I was in those days, grade 13 student. And I felt awful. Like I felt the world was caving in on me. I thought that was it. I was so disappointed with myself, my performance on that day. That evening, my mother was kind to me, and she took me out to a movie. Burt Reynolds was starring in The Longest Yard. It was a football movie. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it was really comforting because she took me out. We went out. I started to kind of reconcile what had happened. And what is it? Like, it's a high school football game. So the world's still revolving. Everything is okay. It's not like any major tragedy has happened. But I know exactly what you're saying about the karate. And I've had so many failures related to that, but I've tried to learn, and I've developed, no question, thick skin as a result of not succeeding. Mo and I both know that you don't often get your grants accepted first time around. I've had so many failed grants, so many rejection letters from journals for publications I've submitted, and it hurts. And the language that's used sometimes that comes back at you, it makes you feel like you're this tall. So, but you try to erase all of those things and just get to the fundamentals. Well, maybe there is some rationale in what the reviewer said about my paper. Maybe if I did this, it actually will make it better. So we all try self-improvement, trying to make things better for each of us. And I think lessons learned from each failure is going to help you become a better individual and eventually, in due course, along the path that you've selected, more successful.
So much, Jim, in life is about trying to figure out, and we have a group of folks here from various stages, to some are very senior leadership roles and others are just beginning their careers, undergraduate. And you always feel like, okay, what do I have to do to get to the next level? You're always asking that, that internal calculus is, and I'll say it kind of, in the context of very, there are a series of check marks I need to get to the next step, and I know that is what is expected of me. At what point do you stop in your head, and maybe this never happens for some, but I know I've gone through that myself, I suspect you have, just looking at your story, is Miles Davis, very famously in his later years said, it took me a long time to play like myself. And I look at that as an analogous to, your first papers, I'm copying somebody else. The first ideas, I'm looking at other people's ideas and trying to copy and do this. I'm trying to, learn to play an instrument. I play the songs I love. When do you feel, or when does that transition typically happen? And what were the events, I guess, in your mind that said, I feel finally like I can be myself and not have to play, a game?
Yeah, we're all creatures of habit. We're in a position where we know how to play the games to get ahead and also to advance our careers. And I, just like you, I was on that academic treadmill for so many years. Thankfully, I feel like I have nothing else that I really need to go out there to prove to individuals. I've probably felt that way for a little while now, but you're right. I mean, when do you take the initiative to take those bold steps to say, I don't have to do it this way anymore, just because the rest of the group is studying this way of, preventing cancer or looking into the causes of heart disease through this clinical trial, like the work that you do, Mo. I just have become branched out and have thought, this is what I really think is important for me. I think this is a contribution. And so one of my long-term goals in my career, and it's taken 35 years to achieve, is a real, like a true bench to bedside transition. So we all talk about that, going from the bedside to the bench. And so much of my research work over the years, maybe yours too, Mo, but for sure for me, has gone along the bench side, and then stops, right? It just doesn't make that final connection to the real world. And probably because I was playing a game, like I was trying to just do what everybody else was doing. So we thought outside the box a little bit, and just the way that things are circuitous in life, we had an opportunity to treat a condition in young children based on research work that was coming out of my lab that was a bit bold because it had never been tried before. Using a delivery strategy, the brain has this barrier around it that prevents large molecules from crossing. It's called the blood-brain barrier, and it prevents a lot of chemotherapeutics, antibodies, cellular therapy from getting in. And there's a particular tumor that has a really robust, intact blood-brain barrier, and we wanted to break it down to deliver things into it to help these children with these malignant tumors. So we had a collaboration with a group that was exploring the use of MR-guided focused ultrasound. So using that, we broke down the blood-brain barrier, and we transitioned this from animal work in my laboratory, because we had already started working on it before we connected with the real maven for clinical MR-guided focused ultrasound, Claire Volhinen, he's at Sunnybrook Hospital. And we wrote the clinical trial. It took 2 years to get it through Research Ethics Board. Got it through, and it was novel, and we've now treated worldwide 9 children in the world with this strategy. And it's phase 1. which means there's feasibility and safety. So you can't talk about, outcomes and strategies and survivals, but you can say it's safe and that it looks feasible. And you know what? The children are not at all harmed by the procedures. The first time in my career, 35 years to do one phase 1 clinical trial, right? But we've done it.
Just before, Gordon, I don't know if you probably has a follow-up here, but can you speak a little bit to the idea of commercializing? Because obviously it's a novel medication. Are you having to take it through Health Canada, FDA? Like, what would be what's been your experience with the idea of not only do you, really think about a new novel therapy, but, in the world that is commercialization, University of Toronto, I suspect, is very keen on that. How does that work with you as a scientist?
Yeah, we're probably okay with commercialization, but the group at Stanford, right, the biodesign group, they're like phenomenal what they're doing for commercializing things from concept to the clinic. But they have an army of people working on this now. They have so much support in their system. In general, we pale in comparison to the US, I think, for commercialization, although it's happening. And we've started, when I was chair of surgery, we started the surgeon entrepreneur career paths, right? So you can go from being an assistant professor to full professor by virtue of commercializing things as you're being a surgeon. So you invent a technique or invent a piece of equipment, you commercialize it, you can go all the way to professor on that pathway alone. And that's hard to do in the main academic centers, right? Because you need to show grants and publications and usual metrics which just aren't available for this pathway. So we're supporting it. We think it's good. More and more of our surgeons are enrolled in this, but I still think that we just don't have the venture cap, the angel investors to help Canada take it to the level that the US is, because they have 10 times the economy, 10 times the number of people, 10 times the strategists that we have. Well, I think we can still learn from them, and I think we're leaving our mark in some areas.
So I want to take you to Killarney, to your, you want to go there? Okay,
I love talking about Killarney.
Let's go there. To answer your question you asked before, one of my friends has a cottage that he barely uses, so this is my special place. You know what they say, like, what's better than having a boat? It's your friend has a boat. So what I want to ask about Killarney, what do you search your soul for when you are in Killarney?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gore. And I think that there's so much family history there, because when our kids were small, every year we would go to Killarney, and we would look forward as a family to going at night to the campsites. We started first with what was called car camping. So you park your car, you put your tent next to the car on a campsite. You're surrounded by others who have cars and tents. It's, looking back on it, I'm amazed that people still do that, because it's not exactly being alone in the wilderness when you've got like 100 campers all around you, 100 campfires at night, all very close to each other, a lot of noise and stuff. So we started doing this interior camping. We started escaping and going into the interior, and we'd go for days on the canoe trips with the kids when they were very young. So you had to plan it, take all your food, all your gear with you, and get campsites. And you would be miles away from everyone. You wouldn't see a soul for days. You would see wildlife. We had moose come into our campsites. We had bears, not threatening us, but they were very nearby. Deer, fox, turtles, beavers, and it was amazing. And the kids would see these, these animals and this wildlife. And at night, Mari would pull out a book, and we'd read by the stars at night, by the campfire, and they would be intently listening to the story that she would read for them, and just the fondest of memories. So it goes way back in time for us. So when a piece of property became available in Killarney, and it's inside the park, so I can put my boat, which is a canoe. I don't have any powered vehicles there. It's all canoe, it's paddle boats, it's a rowboat, and so on. And there are no motorized vehicles allowed on the lake. I can do that. I can be in the park instantaneously and get away from things, and it brings back all of those very fond memories we had as a family. And just knowing that there's more to what we're doing in our lives at work and from day to day. There's like a more powerful kind of force or being or whatever you want to call it out there, that we should spend more time with to recalibrate, to get our souls at peace, and to find that solace that I think is part of your question. So when I go there, it's all about the great outdoors. It's about relaxation, about doing something completely different than what I'm doing day to day in neurosurgery. And I just love doing it. Like this weekend, I'll be shoveling the deck because they had 2 feet of snow. But that's okay. That's different than doing a craniotomy for epilepsy or something.
Can I follow up quickly, Mo? Okay, I want to. So I do research on creativity and innovation. So I want to ask you something about the great work that you've done at SickKids. So you have this fantastic center at SickKids, one of the largest in the world for neurosurgery, for pediatric neurosurgery. And I was MBA director for a year here at the group, for a year and a half. And I've found that the administrative and bureaucratic burden can sometimes, often does, stifle creativity and innovation. I kind of smirked at your idea of you tried to create a logo for the Department of Surgery. You can't have a logo, so you did it anyway. You kind of just put it on everything. How do you do work in a large, old institution like University of Toronto and leave an imprint and do something creative and not let it stifle the creativity, the novelty? I guess I'm looking for 2 things. 1, how do you do that? And 2, how do you persevere? 35 years, first stage 1 clinical trial. So how do you balance that? Like institutions do that, we know that. They try and maintain this path dependency. So how do you manage those 2 things?
Yeah, so creativity can be done even in static, staid old departments like ours and universities, which have their rules and regulations, and I totally get why they have a lot of these restrictions in place, and as you said, they might be stifling creativity, but I worked within the confines of our department, and I brought what I thought was the best team on board to help move us navigate the future for our group. And this is a lesson, I don't know, Mo, if you've ever done this, but when I became chair of surgery, there were like 6 applicants for the position, and I knew them. I knew all of them. They were all actually friends, and so at the end of the day, and this gets to one of the points Mo raised, there's one person who gets the job and there are 4 or 5 others who don't, right? And so how do you feel about that? So you know what? I actually approached all of them who had applied, and I asked them if they would join my cabinet and come on board with me. And Robin McLeod was one of them. She had applied for the job, and she's a phenomenal clinical epidemiologist. I didn't know exactly what I wanted her to do, but I just knew I wanted her in my cabinet. So I asked her, would you want to be vice chair of clinical? And she thought about it, but she said, you know what, I want to be vice chair of best practices in quality in your department. I said, great. So we established for the first time a vice chair in best practices in the Department of Surgery. Never been done before. Similarly, Ori Rothstein, a big name in general surgery and also surgery at the University of Toronto, he had applied. So I made him my associate chair. Robin Richards became vice chair of clinical. And I don't think these individuals would mind me telling you what they did, as a result, because we built a great department of surgery together. So those that also applied, I asked to join my executive. And it was fantastic. It was fabulous. And I think they really appreciated the opportunity to participate since they, didn't get the chair position. Obviously I'd have to ask them, but we did great work together. We built and we actually worked around the confines of the University of Toronto and just navigated our own creativity to build programs, to add new groups, to look into global surgery, which hadn't been done before, to bring in philanthropy like never before, to help us, accomplish more things that we weren't able to do because we didn't have the funds and finances to do what often is needed to be creative in the workspace. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Then the trajectory over 35 years, yeah, you know what? Probably my best creative days are over. I'll say this, like I used to write music, right? So I used to write music, and I wrote a piece that was played at our wedding when Mari and I were married on the chapel organ at Princeton. I just sat down and wrote it. Like, it took me a couple hours. If I played it for you, I think you would listen to it, and I think it wouldn't be bad. But if I had to sit down now to write a piece of music, I've tried recently, and I can still do it, but I'm not sure I still have the exact same creative flow like I had back then. Maybe it's an aging thing, I'm not sure. But I can still do it. I just think there's probably a window where your creativity is at the maximum. I know you've studied this, Goran, so you know about surgeons. I think I saw one of your pieces about surgeons are as intelligent, as smart as the population, but you know what, their creativity is a little bit less, right? I think was the point of one of your works, right? Which I thought was very interesting. And I think in surgery, we just keep running the mill and we keep doing the same thing over and over again, and it can be a bit of a stifle to creativity.
I'm going to just also realize that we're at 30 minutes, and I know we can go back and forth for probably another hour easily. I wonder if there's any burning questions from those of you in the audience.
Yeah, I guess the term is playing by ear, meaning that you hear it and you can play it, right? So a lot of musicians, like some of the most skillful pianists in the world, like Yuja Wang, if you've ever heard her play, she's amazing. But I bet she couldn't hear something and just play it. She needs her music to play it. I don't know for sure, but I'm just saying a lot of like really high level pianists cannot play by ear necessarily. So I don't know what that skill is or what that talent represents, but for sure, I've always been able to hear something, and music is deeply embedded in my being, my soul. So I can figure it out without the construct of the page of the notes in front of me. But in terms of that now applying to other things, yeah, I mean, I can look at videos now of somebody doing an operation, and I can take that immediately to my patient, and I can virtually do the same thing because I've just had so much background, so much time on task that I can actually do those things without having to have a recipe book in front of me saying, do this first, do this next. I mean, it becomes very clear after you have that experience. Yeah, I'll answer that in a couple of ways. One is creativity in the old days on the football field was greater than it is today as for a quarterback. By that I mean I called all my plays myself. I was not getting a play sent in from the bench or from up high as the quarterbacks today are. They're all fed information on what play to call next. Back in the day, I had to look at the defense. I had to creatively figure out how we can spoil the defense, run around them or go through them or over top of them to score a touchdown. I had to do that, and that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that opportunity to use my own intelligence, creativity, talents to figure out what was going to be the best way to overcome. As I was approaching the end of my football career, game day films were coming into existence, so you could study the opposition by looking at the way that they formed their defenses, their offense, and so on. And you could almost predict in a given formation on the football field what play was going to be run. Not always, but you had a good idea. So in the Vanier Cup game, the UBC team had studied us so well, they kind of knew exactly what I was doing. So I tossed at least 3 interceptions that game, and I almost never threw an interception. But that's because they knew exactly where I was going to throw the ball. They knew to whom I was going to throw, and they had studied us really well. So that was in part why it wasn't my best game. But it's kind of it's just a footnote now because the final score was 16-3. And I'm as happy now that we won the game because all my colleagues who made up for my lack of ability or performance on that day, they played, they brought their game way up, and it was because of the defense that day why our team actually won the game. They kept UBC stalled, and so as a result, we could be victorious. So I was delighted for that, but I was, disappointed in my own performance. I've come to terms with it, I think, over the years. In answer to that, I'd say we've had legacy and tradition at the University of Toronto. It's 100 years old now. The neurosurgery division started in 1924, so it's now 102 years. So over the course of time, the previous leaders of the division, I was one, much further down the road, but the previous divisions of the leader were all in line, for wanting to advance the academic mission for neurosurgery. So you can go all the way back to K.G. Mackenzie, who was the first neurosurgeon in Toronto, up to the present, who's Dr. Neer Lipsman at Sunnybrook. And each of the chairs along the way has added, I think, to that legacy piece for the University of Toronto. You know what? Dynasties, however, come and go. I mean, there's no dynasty that lasts forever. We've been very fortunate so far in Toronto. Like 100 years is a long time to be an academic program still leading the way and doing its best to shape and formulate the next wave of neurosurgeons. But I actually have some concerns that it's getting close to the time when a dynasty might be kind of changing. You're hearing it from me just because I've had such a long track record in neurosurgery all these years. And that's just sometimes a natural evolution of human behavior, the course of human experience. But as far as I'm talking to you right now, we're still very much at the pinnacle or top of neurosurgery. But can it be maintained for the next 10, 20, 30 years, next generation or two? That's a very interesting question that I don't have the answer. And yeah, you mentioned imperfections. I think a lot of this is leadership style and dealing with conflict in the environment in which you work and making sure that everybody's doing things for the right reason, trying to pull everybody, have everybody rowing in the same direction and reaching those milestones and advancing the organization that makes it as good as it can be. Yeah, so definitely take care of yourself. And I mentioned things outside of the rigors of your discipline. So do those things, work as hard as you can be to be the best researcher, the best PhD student, the best surgeon, the best doctor you can be. Like that's really important. But there's also time. And I hope I mentioned that. I feel like I've always been pretty good at time management. I've been good at juggling things and not too many balls over the years have fallen. But yeah, learn how to time manage really well. That would be really good advice to you. So, and there are lots of hours in the day. I think there's ample hours for you to do all that you set out to do. Don't neglect yourself. Keep your hobbies going because for the future, for your second career, for what you want to do later, you've seen the trapping of so many surgeons who've retired and they're at a loss. They don't know what to do. And their careers kind of spiral and their personal lives kind of run out of control, sadly. But I did mention at the beginning too, partner for life. Find somebody with whom you can enjoy life if possible. Build your families, get support from your extended family, immediate family members, and also keep yourself balanced. Like come back to work balance, go to Killarney, get recharged, come to work after the weekend, and you'll just do better for your patients. You'll do better for your research work. Mo will be happier with your PhD thesis, I guarantee you. Yeah, mentorship is key. I showed one example in my presentation of my good fortune of mentoring Peter Dirks, right, as a phenomenal surgeon, scientist, human being, amazing individual. So throughout my career, I've had the great good fortune of having mentored like so many residents, because I was chair of neurosurgery, and so many faculty as chair of surgery. I've also been involved in all these national organizations in neurosurgery where I had ample opportunity to interact with my colleagues, and then on the journal, mentoring members of the editorial board. I just find that so fulfilling to be able to do that and to see their successes. And, for example, back to Peter, what he's done in his career as a scientist, he's totally eclipsed anything I could dream of doing. Am I feeling threatened by that? Do I feel jealous or envy? No, I'm ecstatic that he's gone beyond anywhere that I could possibly go. And as a mentor, that's how you should all feel. You want your mentees to far exceed, to supersede everything that you've done. Then you know that you've been a success as a teacher. So some of my mentors included Harold Hoffman, who was a pediatric neurosurgeon at Sick Kids. He was crazy, but he was a good surgeon. And I learned lots from him, and I did some things his way, because that's the way he said, this is the only way to treat craniopharyngioma. That's a type of tumor that's really hard to remove. He said the only way to treat craniopharyngioma is to remove it completely. And he tried all the time to do that, but you know what the consequences of that can be. So I've modified teachings over the years based on personal experiences after I've been mentored and so on. So yeah, some things I've done myself without mentorship, without doing it the way I've been instructed, I think have worked out really well. But there are times when, the old and tried and true way is not a bad way to do things as well. First of all, you need to be adequately trained. And I got training just as you did, or you're getting your PhD. So I got my PhD. And I must say that was actually an important step, getting a PhD. If you're interested in doing science, it's not absolutely mandatory, but you know what? It helps when you go to apply for grants, if you're submitting papers for publication, to show that you've actually done a dedicated time period for science, like your PhD, is meaningful. So don't think that it's not, right? So it's really important that you get yourself adequately trained. And the PhD is a serious matter, right? To be able to have a hypothesis, to follow that hypothesis through to completion, to defend it in front of your peers, to publish or to write it up, right? To have a document that is demonstrated, that passes muster at the university. That's a tried and true, legitimate process that I would encourage you to continue to follow and complete. And then the connectivity, however, I think is your point. The question is related to the clinic side. Like, are there enough hours in the day that you can be successful at both? And I think there are, but you need to get yourself well trained for both. And you're doing it now in the PhD stream. I did the same. So many of my mentees that I've had the good fortune of training have done that as well. And they've been enormously successful. Times might be changing a little bit in terms of one's ability to combine those two careers, and maybe the study pathways are a little bit different, so that, for example, for surgeons to do like fundamental basic science research and then come back and be a spine surgeon, right? Might be a non sequitur nowadays. So you might want to think about a PhD in an area that's more closely aligned to spine surgery, if that's your area. So maybe registries, like spinal registries, registry science, doing qualitative and semi-quantitative outcome studies, those kinds of things that are like going to drive your clinical practice, going to mesh more completely with your clinical practice. But at the end of the day, try to find how your basic science or your PhD work is going to link immeasurably with your clinical interests, and then you'll be successful.